Hello and welcome to the Key Club podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Cairns, and today we have a wonderful guest for you, a long-time friend and in many ways a mentor from afar. His name is Paul Lanfear. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much for having me, Michelle. I take it as an enormous compliment that you put mentor in that sentence. I'm not sure I entirely deserve that, but it's a thrill to be here. We've known each other for a long time. I've been really looking forward to catching up with you.
Amazing. Well, let's dive into that in a second. But for people who don't know you, I'll just do a little background. So Paul obtained a first-class law degree and started professional life as a barrister. He later qualified as a solicitor, practicing commercial, banking and finance litigation for 10 years, both in London, Leeds and working for two of the world's leading law firms. All of this before leading a demanding qualification programme for prospective barristers, starting a family and becoming an award-winning property entrepreneur, investor and multiple business owner. Now, these days he's focused on consultancy, family and surfing. So, Paul, it's funny you should say we've known each other for a while because I always like to scroll back in WhatsApp to see when was actually the first interaction. And would you believe it? It's almost to the day 8 years ago.
No way.
Yeah, so that was fun. And we obviously met through the Manchester breakfast meeting, and then you started yours and I started mine, and then we've kind of kept crossing paths. And I joined the inner circle, and then I fell pregnant, and that life changed. And yeah, and then and Matty's just turned 4 on Sunday.
I saw that.
Yeah.
4 years. Doesn't the time absolutely fly by?
Crazy. So yeah, and mentor from afar. I put that in because I was obviously really looking forward to this chat that we're having today, and I think you have stood out for me as one of these kind of like role models in a way are not just about property and investing and the kind of technical support, if you like, from your community, but also your philosophy, like your approach to life, how you look at designing your life. And I think there are very few people who are talking about that in a really public way. So I'm curious because obviously it's been a while since we've spoken, and I know we've got lots to get into today. But have things kind of changed for you dramatically over the last 8 years, or are they kind of much the same? You kind of settled on what you want out of life?
I would say every year is like a new revelation. And somebody who works very closely with us said to me fairly recently, he goes, it's really interesting working with you, Paul, because every year is very different. You're not just kind of on the hamster wheel doing the same thing every year. And I'll dive into why that is. Interestingly, I totally agree with you in the sense of I never hold myself out as like a property guru. And I'll be honest with you, I have a love-hate relationship with property. So right now, I'm actually falling back in love with it, interestingly, because I think sentiment is so bad that that actually makes me interested in it again. When everybody is telling me like, this is the best thing in the world, we're all going to make millions, property doubles every 10 years, I kind of become very nervous and think, I'm not so sure. But now, because sentiment is so bad, and for reasons I'm happily to get into, I've become more pro property. But what is the interesting thing is we have a mutual friend, Tony, and when I first kind of met Tony for like a proper chat, he said to me, I hear you're the guy who's actually done it. I said, what do you mean? I hear, like, everybody says about you, either to your face or behind your back, that you're the guy who's actually got his life worked out. And he said, yes, Tony, I am that guy. And then obviously I've worked with Tony, and he can judge for himself. We can all check in with Tony and see whether he agrees. What is that about? I think, and is everything is so different than 8 years ago. I've got really fond memories. I think, like shout out to Fraser and the guy who started that breakfast, who was a mentor of mine, and obviously had his challenges. Lots of people have had his challenges as well. But that meeting was such a good meeting. because it's really hard. It's really hard when you're in the thick of it. So that would have been we were like doubling down. We were about like 6 or 7 years into a period of like really rapid growth. So the first 5 years, I always think is absolute hell. And anybody who tells you that it isn't is just lying to you. Like the first 5 years are hell. It's so stressful. You're raising boatloads of money. You're doing everything as professionally as you can. You're not getting much sleep. You like everything. You're paying the price. Well, I suppose I'm just speaking for myself. Like I was just paying the price everywhere in my health, my relationships. No one's seeing my friends. See them like once a year, and they'd be like, "Mate, like, what are you doing?" So I'm just really working at this thing. But I'm happy to say it's all now worth it. But that was a great meeting, and the philosophy of that meeting was like no presentations, but just come, share a problem, share an opportunity. And I used to drive across the Pennines for it, leaving at like 6 o'clock in the morning. But I always got so much value out of it. And then I don't know you know this story, but then the host kept on having challenges making his own meeting, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm in where did he have that flat? He had an apartment in Europe somewhere, a really beautiful place, Monaco or something like that." And he would phone me and say, "Oh, I can't cover my meeting. Will you be able to cover my meeting?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I could." And then eventually it turned into, "This is ridiculous, Paul. You need to have your own meeting." I was like, "No, I'm too busy." And I was doing like all this corporate stuff, like 100 people in a room, dry ice, music blaring. And I was just like, "Mate, I don't have any capacity to do anything else." And he goes, "Right, just do it." And then I had a bit of a like reboot of my life and set up my own breakfast meeting, and the rest is history. It's worth mentioning what that reboot is, because I mean you remember Phil?
Yeah.
So we had a mutual friend, a really good guy, one of the nicest guys in property, really healthy, really happy, pretty zen, happily married, beautiful kids, dream home, chunky portfolio, worth 7 figures, income of 6, and all the rest of it. And he he very tragically left us. I was looking the other day. He was 43, which is just insane.
I'm 43 now, so I can relate to that. What age is that? 43?
It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. With life expectancy now in like the 80s and 90s, I would say, it's crazy. And in my little property community where we support each other through the breakfast group, 2 guys this year have left us. 149, 151, taken far too soon. Family guys, got kids. So that when you ask that question of like, what is it the same as 8 years ago? It's completely different. And a big part of that was Phil. Like, we became net millionaires on the same day. We had, roughly the same income. We'd gone through all the same problems, all the highs and lows. And that after, a year, I would say that year after we lost him was the most difficult year of my life for lots of reasons, because he kind of brings to the surface all this stuff. But then I discovered surfing and became completely addicted to it. And it's never been the same since. So obviously my values are freedom, family, wealth, which is a route to getting security. But a big part of that is also adventures. And really everything has been inspired by them. So there's lots of great things I've left behind. And there were great things, but you just have to grow and change and reprioritize things. So 8 years ago, I would guess we had like 236 tenants probably. I think we're probably at our peak or there or thereabouts, all in HMO rooms. Everything we touched was under HMO, including, like little 3-bedroom houses, which I know some people, that's that model. And if you can get it to work, more power to you, definitely. fewer tenants, that's great. But, we were like squeezing margins out of things that really didn't have a margin to give us. And we've pretty much changed that as an approach. But yeah, so no, in answer to your question, it's very different now. So we have a much a leaner ecosystem. We have less properties, but also we have deleveraged in that time, both courtesy of a rising market and also courtesy of a deleveraging process. And we have a lean, very low hassle portfolio. And when we went through the restructuring of the portfolio, we went into it with the idea of lifestyle first. So we are happy to take less money if it means less stress and less administration. But the strangest thing has happened over the last few years. Obviously, mortgage rates have gone up. Energy is like we pay the highest energy costs in the whole of Europe. What that means is our model, because we've now pulled away from energy and cleaners and all of that stuff, is actually more profitable now, even though our gross revenues are less. So we don't have room by room. We have very few room by room now. We do whole houses, boutique houses, and the profits are still there to be made. And like I said about actually for the first time in ages being like positive on property. Uh, like governments are never going to stop spending money. We've learned that this year. So not throwing the Labour Party under a bus. I mean, I think everybody's feeling a bit frustrated, but like they cannot cap spending. They cannot cap spending. But then look across the pond. Look at Trump. Look at Doge, Elon's project. They could not get that to progress. So it's not a left-right thing. It's not like Labour, Tory, Conservative, Democrats. The problem is government. Government is the problem. I saw someone do a really good post a while back, which was, if you think any politician is coming to the rescue, you're deluded. And I would have that as a tattoo if I was to get yet another tattoo. So we know the governments aren't going to live in their means. It's almost impossible to build houses in the UK. So we're making less houses than we were in 1966, I think. We all know planning's a nightmare. I just had a planning consultant on my podcast. So the currency debasement is continue. More people want to live in the UK because it's such an amazing place to live. For the first time in years, I'm actually reasonably bullish on property for that reason.
And do you think the things that have happened and Lose and Phil and that has made you kind of more think at a higher level where you're just less in the detail and the problems and more focused on the solutions?
I definitely take like a very macro picture outlook.
Yeah.
Like so I think if I was to do anything differently is I'm obsessed by the bigger picture and I think about it all the time. I think about it every single day. So I will sound like an absolute crazy person if I go into the detail of some of the stuff I do, but I'm willing to like allude to some of it, but I will sound like a completely mad person. So I do think this is a really interesting time in history to invest some really good quality time and effort in what we think the big picture is. Because I don't know whether you've noticed, Michelle, but like we live in really interesting times. Like things are so crazy that I think we should double down. I think we should double down on our lives, become really serious on our lives, and really design them. I was speaking to a friend of mine about this and saying there's no better time in history to really kind of lock in now and focus on exactly what you want. And she like paused for a minute and she goes, are you basically saying either this is going to end wonderfully and therefore we should double down and like just go for it, or this is all going to end up terribly and we should party like 1999? I said both are true. Yeah. Both are true. So I'm actually very optimistic about the future. I think there are, I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories, but I think there are very powerful forces at work, including nation states, who want you to hate your country, hate your life, like just they're out there to influence you in a very negative way, and we need to resist all of that. You know, what we see, you know, in these little sort of 6-inch screens on our phones isn't the real world. I think most people, if you said to them, what do you think about what's going on in the world? If they reflect on what they see on a screen, they'll say, this is awful, Paul. This is really bad. If you ask them to put your phone down and say, in terms of the humans you've met in the last 7 days and the interactions with them, how would you describe them? And I'm sure not everybody would do this. Most people would say, do you know what? Most humans I've met this week have been lovely, and they're working really hard, and they're trying to do the right thing, and they've been broadly helpful to me. Particularly if you're broadly helpful to them. There's a book, if you want a book, there's a book called The Fourth Turning. Have you read The Fourth Turning yet?
No.
Okay. Have you heard of The Fourth Turning?
No, not at all.
Oh, amazing. Gosh, I'm really adding value here.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's this book called The Fourth Turning.
Okay.
And it's written by a couple of American authors. One of them, unfortunately, has passed away. It's a reasonably old book now, like it's decades old. And it became famous in COVID because it foretold COVID.
Right.
So specifically, there was a chapter that explained there would be a pandemic. This is how the government would behave, and these are the consequences of it. The authors are also the people who invented the term millennials.
Okay.
And the way they have made money, and the remaining author still makes money, is they act as consultants to businesses, and they talk about demographics and what the different generations are like and how businesses can relate to them. So if you want to market to a millennial business, you know, a millennial client base, what are the messages that you would send? So I'm Gen X, so there's a particular stuff that would resonate with mine. Anyway, the book talks about the fact that we live in 80-year cycles, which is roughly the length of a human lifetime. And we're now going, and there are different stages. The stage we're going now is called the fourth turning, where everything falls apart. And it's because all of the people who fought in the Second World War, so the last great global conflict, are now very, very sadly leaving us. So my granddad was in the Second World War, came back with terrible PTSD. We lost him a long time ago now. But people have forgotten the horrors of war, and of like what they describe in the book as total war. And so what arises from that is this kind of sense of chaos, which I think a lot of people listening to the podcast might resonate with. Like, we just seem to live in this like lawless, chaotic world. And what is going to evolve through the fourth turning as we move into the awakening, which is the next stage, is order is resumed, chaos subsides, there's a greater sense of community, and it's less about kind of the individual, but it's more about, you know, us as a society moving forwards constructively. So I think it's good news. I think it's really positive. I think the 2030s are going to be amazing. I think a lot of the problems we're struggling with now, I think we're going to make progress. We're going to make difficult decisions. We'll get to the other side of them. We'll look back. We'll be glad that we've done them. The 2030s will be extraordinary. And you think about where AI is going to take us as well. You know, look at like where medical technology is now. So my dad was rushed to hospital the other day. Looked like, you know, my mum basically thought he was going to die. Quite rightly she did. Phoned me at 4 o'clock in the morning, jumped out of bed, drove down to see them. Within 24 hours, he walked out of the hospital. So he walked into the hospital dying, he like couldn't breathe, body was like doing the final bits. 24 hours later, I walked him out of the hospital. Like, I didn't have to take a wheelchair with me. He walked out of the hospital. So you think where we're going to be by mid 2030, let's say 2033, 35. I don't know if you follow the guy who does the Moonshots podcast, who talks about the singularity. You know, he says his advice is just live till 2035. Because if you can live to 2035, we will have cured cancer, we will have cured heart disease,
Oh,
um, possibly universal basic income because the robots will be doing all the work, whether, whatever your view is on that. So reasons to be positive, I would say.
yeah, absolutely incredible. And I completely agree. I think that you've got a choice to focus on all the negative or focus on all the opportunity and the creativity and just like all of the positive things it can bring. And it looks like it's bringing it. It's just the speed, I think, is scary to people who realize the speed of what's happening. I think most people just don't really. They just think, oh, there's cool AI videos on Instagram or something. That's really cool. But I don't think people really, in the most part, understand like what is happening in the background and the advances in technology and healthcare. It is incredible, and that's one reason I love talking to you. And I think you have, as you say, you're focusing on that macro. Now, I'm the opposite because I think I just need to focus on what I can control today. And I can't control all of that stuff. So I like to take snippets from people that I trust, who I know that have done the research, and be informed that way. So it's great to, I'll check out that book as well because that'd be interesting.
I'll give you one other final thing to check out just on the subject of that, which is so the video is now a bit old, but the principles and the book is the same. There's a book called Enlightenment Now by Professor Steven Pinker, and he has got this YouTube video called "Is the World Getting Better or Worse? A Look at the Numbers," and he wrote this fantastic book called Enlightenment Now, which I really recommend everybody gets on audio and listens to. And basically, he delves into the data. So he takes all the politics out of it, he takes all of the ideology out of it, he takes all the bias out of it, and just says, what does the data tell us? The data tells us that the infant mortality, is falling like off a cliff, which means that more and more babies are being born healthily without any complications, and the mother's doing well, all the rest of it. The people dying in wars, broadly speaking, like that, the charts are going down quite sleepily, suggesting that actually, even though yes, we live in a world where there's a lot of conflict, the actual number of people dying in wars is going down. More people are living in democracies. Like poverty generally is being combated like never before. And I know this isn't like what we hear in the media. So the reaction I would have is that can't be true because of what we're told. But I urge people to listen to his book, check out his thing. There's reasons to be positive. I think just on to finish on the positive thing, I do believe positivity is a superpower as well.
Agreed.
Insofar as people sound really smart when they're foretelling the end of the world. And a prolific property influencer once told me that he puts the word crash in the title of his YouTube videos because it's what gets people to click on the videos. And very often his videos then change the subject halfway through. But so people sound smart when they're being pessimistic and telling you that it's the end of the world. But I think cultivating rationally an optimistic point of view is a superpower, because without it, it's very difficult to get forward movement, and forward movement is the thing that we all need. And we can segue into how you might achieve that if you like.
Yes, please. Well, I'm going to just throw in a question to segue,
Yeah.
if that's okay. Because I heard you say once that being a barrister and sister, the law isn't about justice, it's about finding answers to questions.
Yes.
So, talk to us about a question that you've got that you're looking for an answer to.
A question that I'm looking for an answer
Yeah,
to.
on that topic
Wow.
that you were going towards.
I think the question that's on the top of my mind at the moment is how to create abundant, good health. It's something that I have invested in and have made really good progress with a few surprises along the way. The surprise along the way is I kind of reached that point where I thought, do you know what? I'm really going to focus on my health. I'm really going to like take the next step. I read this really fascinating book by Peter Attia called Outlive. Have you read that?
Rich has, and I think it's in my audible somewhere,
I,
but
I
I
mean,
haven't
you
got it.
know,
I've heard
you're
snippets.
clearly a very healthy human being. I would highly recommend it. I recommend everybody to seek it out. I listened to it, and he talks about that marginal decade, so that last year that you live, whether that's like 80 to 90 or whatever that may be. And, if anybody's witnessed their parent in that chapter of life, they'll understand why that's such an important period of life, because life suddenly does change quite a lot. And in that book, what captured my imagination in that book was he said, there are a few core things that you've got to be able to do, so you need to train for them. And it was just really like fascinating. He was like, you need to be able to run a mile so you can catch a flight. You need to be able to do like a farmer's walk, with heavy weights in each hand so that you can carry your suitcases, and all the rest of it. And I suppose I wasn't fully on board. We then flew to Portugal, and for some reason we had a random connecting flight in Frankfurt. Our first flight was late, and we had to do the changeover in Frankfurt, and we had to sprint across this airport, right? And it was at least a mile. And my 18-year-old daughter was miles ahead of us, and me and Liz were well behind her. And then we got to the destination airport, whatever it was, and the lift had gone. So it was I carried Liz's case, my case. I had a laptop bag on my back, and 5 flights of stairs. And then we got on the connecting bus to get to a different part of the airport, and it was packed, and there was nowhere to put our cases other than on this top row, which was well above our head. So it's like getting a kettlebell and doing a snatch with a kettlebell. And after those 3 experiences, which happened all in the space of an hour, I thought, he's got a point. This guy has got a point. So I really drilled down on my health. I lost 4 stone. I had 4 stone to lose. The comedy of it, or not the comedy of it, but the surprise on it was decades ago, I was in a horrendous motorcycle accident. I should never, motorcycles are dangerous, kids. Avoid them, especially when you're an idiot like me. And I had to have my whole right leg rebuilt and all kinds of things like that. And the function of losing weight meant that the metalwork that they put in began to become exposed, because it didn't have all the cushioning that it had before. And I saw this consultant surgeon. He said, unfortunately, this is really common in people who become lean, and who weren't previously lean. So, we can have it out for you, and you won't have any. I don't think you'll have any problems. And £10,000 later, I had it out, and it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. But it's interesting, isn't it? You move forward in a direction of doing something positive, and there's always a bit of a surprise. So that was a bit of a road. That was a little bit of a speed bump on the road. But now it means I can surf, I can mountaineer, I can do all the other stuff again. So that's really good. So in answer to your question, if I could solve any problem or have a question to anything, it would be absolutely the most abundant good health in the world. And I think I'm moving towards it, and I think my family are moving towards it. But I think about that a lot. I think about that every morning.
I think it's one of those things, a bit like wealth, that you have to give it your attention every day.
Mm-hmm.
You have to always be moving towards it, and then you're not going backwards, right? So it doesn't really matter at the speed of which you're moving, as long as you're moving forward and always kind of building on that.
And I think the two are very related, as you clearly know. It's I think the two are extremely related. A lot of it, I think, is in the mind. It's what we choose to believe and the way that we see the world. I think health is determined by a lot what we think about, and so is wealth. It's chasing after opportunities, being in the right place, being around the right people, taking risks, putting up with the sleepless nights, putting up with being scared. I'm still, actively putting money at risk. And yesterday, I felt scared. It was big numbers, and it was uncomfortable. And big
Same.
decisions.
Yeah.
It never ends, unless, I guess it does end at some point, but not currently for me. I'm still getting after it if I can.
Well, not if you're growing, right? There's always
Yeah.
that getting outside of your comfort zone, that feeling of just stretching what's possible and your life, and whether that's giving back or growing your portfolio or just reaching for your potential. You're always going to
Mhm.
feel like it's a bit scary, right?
Shall I tell you the bad news about growth, Michelle?
Go on.
One of my mentors once said to me, he said, there are only, unfortunately, Paul, there are only two natural states in the universe, which is either growth or decline. So you are picking one of those at every moment in your life. And it gives the example of a tree. Like a tree is never standing still. So it's either growing or it's then passing over and it's in that decline phase. So you've got to pick, haven't you? You've got to pick which mode you want to be in.
Well, thankfully, we're not a tree and we can choose. So,
Exactly. As Jim Rohn says, you can move. You're
yeah,
not a tree. I love.
exactly. Okay, well, let's talk about you've you mentioned about a plan before, and there's that phrase, why an idiot with a plan will always beat a genius without one.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of what you have done in the past and what you're doing now involves a plan. So talk to us about practical plans and how to improve your wealth and your health, your life. You've talked about lifestyle as well through planning.
So there were two. After I lost Phil, there were two books that I revisited, which I'd already revisited, which I'd already spent a lot of time with. But sometimes you just see things with like fresh eyes. It's as if it's the first time you've ever heard that piece of information, and the mind is perhaps more receptive. It's like looking for something. It's trying and it wants to bring in resources. So the first book, just lovely, like classic book, Jim Rohn's The Art of Exceptional Living. Just a nice, easy. I remember listening to that and just beginning to find my feet again. Listening to that and going, okay, I think this is going to be okay. And it, to forewarn people who've not listened to it, it feels really dated in the first couple of chapters, and you kind of think like, what am I, like? Who is this guy? Why am I doing this? But for me, it's like a hockey stick. It's like exponential at the end. At the end, it's like, oh, wow, this is what I came for. Whether other people have that experience, I don't know, but I do. Just circling back to what you were saying about people not understanding where the world is going at the rate it's going, it's because it's exponential, and human beings cannot get their minds around exponential growth, which is the hockey stick. Things aren't going up linear, they are going up like a rocket. And then the second book I revisited was this book by John C. Maxwell, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. There's a chapter in there called The Law of Design. And he gets you to really, he reckons doing it on an annual basis, which clearly makes sense. But I also think we live in a world where you can do it just whenever you like. So obviously I do this like a lot of people in Christmas, January time. And I have an event which I kind of put on, a charity event, which I put on where we do all this stuff. But I genuinely think someone listening to this podcast, you can hard reset your life in a day. So you can get an early night tonight and then wake up tomorrow and just get like on it. You could get his book. You could think about what he recommends in the book, which is to do this kind of audit of your life, which is actually more fun than you think it would be, and decide, more, less, eliminate. Like, what am I not going to do? And it doesn't mean that you hate those things. It's just you might stop going to Starbucks or wherever it is that you decide to do. You might become a great coffee maker at home. So you're not eliminating things because they're bad or anything like that. You're just making new life choices. And then you double down on things that you want to keep the same, relationships with family, hopefully, that kind of thing. And then more of, and that could be like, I'm going to learn an option trading course, or I'm going to learn more about property, or I'm going to learn how to have my own like lifestyle business, or whatever it might be that you want to learn. And then set about like moving in that direction. And like maybe a bit of Stephen Covey in there as well, like start with the end in mind. So have like a vivid picture in your mind about what it is that where you're heading. So as you know, I love being outside. I love adventures. I love surfing. I just like being outside a lot. I like quite a lot of time on my own as well. So as I'm getting older, more introverted, I suppose. I can see it in my mind. I see exactly the way I want it to be. And I create a one-page business plan at the start of the year. I know what I need to focus on. Uh, there are broadly 8 human needs. One of those is having your finances in order, and every single human being on the planet needs to revisit that every year because it always changes. I've had people on my podcast. I have a guy on my podcast who'd sold like a multi-million business, £1 million business, but he had no cash flow because he'd sold the asset, and he was like back to zero. So he was like, "Shit, how do I make money again?" And decide where you're at. Like, is this year you need to shore up your cash flow because we have persistent ongoing inflation regardless of what's in the CPI. I know everything I want to buy goes up by about 10% every single year. It's absolutely bonkers. Like, I know this is a first world problem and luxury problem to have, but like skiing holidays, for the love of God, like what has happened to skiing holidays? Anyway,
I know.
or is it your cash flow is really good, you're pretty comfortable, you're creating a surplus, which is the ideal place to be. Do you need to be storing economic energy for another time, another phase in your life, or for other people in your life? Like, do you have a daughter who might get married at some point? Those and maybe have babies. Who knows? And then it's the tier above is about protection. Is your cash flow totally cool? You're acquiring capital. You're investing in the market every month. Have you attended to, what might happen next? So I'm not going to say the boring things because I don't think they're boring, but wills, power of attorneys, trusts, those kind of things. All the things that become important when things happen. And then the tier above, like you might have all of that handled. And I know people who are in that position, but they have no more purpose, probably because they've attended to all of those things. And so then it's like, well, what's your contribution going to be? And, I'm working with a person right now who has attended to all aspects of their financial life and for the rest of their life. But they are currently revisiting this question of purpose, which I think is interesting. So I would say in a one-page business plan, you need to think about where you're at. Most people are at cash flow and they need to return to cash flow every year, but you might be higher up the hierarchy and you might need to attend to those different things.
What's your key focus for next year then?
So cash flow is pretty good. I'm thinking about a period in time. So I have pithy titles for everything. So I'm thinking about this phase of my life called Silver Surfer. So Silver Surfer is in the mid 2030s, and it's when I'll have access to my SIP and my SAS. So I'm doing very different and interesting things with those, and I am growing those to so they'll make a meaningful difference. The frustration I'm currently dealing with, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it, is obviously, in the last budget, pensions were then put into people's portfolio, put into their estates for the purposes of inheritance tax. I honestly think that is inhumane. I don't think pensions should be changed. I think there should be all of government should agree there are certain things that should be left alone for the good of society, and I think pensions is one of those. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the high horse about that. So that's phase, and then I have this other project which is like in 2040, which is called Nirvana 2.0. So I have a surf retreat on the coast, the profits of which goes to a charity called the Wave Project, who they do this thing called surf therapy. And my recovery from losing Phil was to take myself on a course of surf therapy. Turns out it's recognised, around the world by the NHS. So there's a charity called the Wave Project, and the profits from that business support that charity. So we have the surf retreat. The vision is Nirvana 2.0, which is around 2040, which is to build a retreat center on the coast in some woodland. I already host retreats, but I use other people's spaces. And maybe we'll have a thing where we grow Christmas trees, and everybody who comes to retreat comes back at the week before Christmas, and they can take away a Christmas tree. And if they've got kids, they can get kids to cut down the Christmas trees. So that's Nirvana 2.0. So those are the things that I'm kind of, they're like long-term plans. But even though they're long-term plans, I come up with all this, the vision, create the one-page business plan, then create the quarterly roadmap, then think about month by month. But then every single day, I get my head in my journal for an hour when I wake up. So Liz says I've got ADHD, and she's probably right. And someone else has said I probably do as well. So I have a lot going on in my mind when I wake up. So I have to write things down. So I write everything down that's going on in my mind. And even though, we're recording this in 2025, in here, just this morning, I've got stuff I'm doing in 2026, ideas around that, stuff in the mid 2030s, 2040s, because all of this stuff is just being kind of worked on by the subconscious mind, and I just get it all onto paper, as well as the more important daily actions, like remember to get on Michelle's podcast, remember to have one-to-ones with people this afternoon, that kind of thing. So I should be on
I love it. Tell me more. I just want to dive into that a little bit, because I love this idea of journaling and writing and capturing. And I have this struggle between, should I be capturing it electronically so that I can do something with it and action it, or should it be this brain dump of just getting thoughts out onto paper and as you say, kind of processing it. So do you do anything with those in terms of actioning it, or is it more of just a brain dump to clear your mind in the morning?
So, just this is largely for comedy value, Michelle. You will laugh at me, but I use the best self journals, and I use them in a particular way, which is kind of customized to myself, and I help people do the same thing as well. But they've just set up in the UK, and I'm not on commission. I wish I had an affiliate link to share with you, but I absolutely don't. But because they've just set up in the UK, I've bought an entire year's worth of best self journals, because I'm absolutely obsessed with them, because they've just set up in the UK, so you don't have them shipped from the States anymore.
You know what? I think I've got one upstairs. I'm gonna have to dig it out. I think I might have. It's amongst other piles of journal, these beautiful books, and I work my way through them. But I think I saw it and thought, this looks amazing, but I've never actually used it. So tell me how you use it.
Well, I think that's fair enough. I think there's different journals for different seasons. So the season I'm in at the moment is, I know my direction of travel. It's about executing the plan every single day, waking up, checking in on the plan, and thinking about what connecting with the vision, because it gets you out of bed, makes you do the hard things, and then thinking about what's the 3 things I can do today that are genuinely going to move the needle towards the direction of travel that I want. But I think if you're in a different season of life, where you're in a more reflective, so somebody I've worked with this year is in a very reflective stage, because left their previous profession, but also is taking, I think, a really sensible approach and not sprinting out of the gate, to become, a massive portfolio landlord. She's doing some property, but she's doing it, I think, quite smart, like doing it step by step. And she's doing a lot of inner reflection. So I have a different kind. I've got a very beautiful journal that I'd use for that, but I'm in kind of execution mode. So I use the best self. So the way it works for me is clear vision, 1-page business plan created every January, and then distilled into a roadmap. A very easy way to do your roadmap is to get a wall planner and do it in draft in your wall planner. There you go. Me and Michelle both get our wall planners. And it doesn't hurt to see things in your office, and put the good stuff in there, as well. Like, if you're lucky enough to have got Glastonbury tickets or whatever it is, or your best friend's getting married, or, whatever, or a great anniversary, so that when you are like crunching the numbers and tipping it down outstairs and outside and the roofs, you've got a roof, all that stuff we have to deal with in daily life. It acts as a bit of inspiration. And then every quarter I get a new journal and then map out the whole quarter with the big milestones in that quarter. So let's say you're being very inspired by Michelle's podcast and you're thinking, I'd love to do a podcast like Michelle's, or my own version of it. I think about it in quarters then. So it's like, okay, the first quarter, design the podcast, check out what kind of podcasts you want to have, spend 12, 13 weeks thinking about that. Quarter two, buy a off-the-shelf podcast course for an hour, whatever it is. And that will list all the kit you need. That will list the microphone and the software you might need. Perfect. That's quarter two solved. Quarter three, invite a couple of your friends on your podcast. And then if it's really awful, you can just never speak about it ever again. And they'll be well up for doing your podcast because they'll love it and they want to support you. Record your first couple of podcasts, make loads of mistakes, but get a bit of a feel for it. And then quarter four, release your podcasts, get your thumbnails done, get someone to help you with your branding. And what might have appeared on the 1st of January as like an impossible task, how am I ever going to get a podcast launched? When it's broken down into like quarterly milestones that are just really easy to focus on, then you find a way of getting between those. I don't think we should spend too much time on like every granular task you have to do. It's just like, what are the big milestones in life? Like in the last 2 years, I've learned options trading, and it's now like really nicely profitable, and it's another string to our bow. It's another layer of resilience. How does that start? It starts, well, research all the options trading courses, because some will be good, some will be awful. Invest, like spend your money and invest in the course. Test, like even though it's boring, even though you don't want to do it, and then go live with real money, but only like a fraction of your portfolio, and then release a bit more of your portfolio into it. And it gets a bit scary because you're into the bigger numbers, and then you step in, with the rest of the portfolio you're going to use. And at that point, even though you know what you're doing, it's still terrifying, but you're heading from milestone to milestone. So that's
just one question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people do, whether it's options trading, podcasts, or property,
Mm-hmm.
it can be really overwhelming when you realize what's involved and what you actually need to do. And I think there's a danger for people to get really overwhelmed. So by planning out the year, or the thinking with the end in mind and having those key milestones are great. And how do you bring yourself down to, okay, back to executing on the plan when it does feel really overwhelming?
So we have a mutual friend, fellow podcaster, Tom, from the Cuppa of Upper podcast. He once said something very wise to me. He said, Paul, if we knew how difficult it would be, we probably wouldn't have done it. And I just think that's true. So I think actually a little bit of naivety maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. Because you've got to get started, haven't you?
You do. And you just got to chip away, I think, as well.
Definitely, and keep going. Like, for the love of God, keep going. Particularly if you are in a surfing context, we have this thing called the impact zone, which is where you see all the white kind of frothy waves, where the waves are breaking in on you. The key is to not live in the impact zone. And I think that's true of life and business as well. So if you're going through a really difficult time, if you're in the impact zone, you need to paddle. You need to get out of the impact zone. You cannot stay there for too long. And in property business, that might be negative cash flow, which is really can easily be done. Refurbs, bad, then you're unlucky with a tenant. I'm not negative about tenants. I actually think the relationship with tenants is demonized. Most tenants are good human beings. Most landlords are good human beings. There's a small proportion of both that cause all of the problems, hence why we've got all this legislation coming in. But like your average tenant that we work with, they just want to live in a home and are good people.
But that doesn't make the news, does it, Paul? So
No, it doesn't make headlines. Doesn't what bleeds leads and all that. So Overwhelm, and I would say every week I will have a moment of overwhelm, and I'd say every month I'll have a chronic day of overwhelm where it just fries your mind and you can't think. And it's everything is just a fog, and it's difficult to concentrate because there's just so much going on. So I think it's about, if you're in the impact zone in that moment, it's about what are the fundamentals, and what are the key actions, no more than three, that you can take to move forwards.
Ooh,
Um,
um,
the, the most important tasks, basically.
wow.
So it's just what are three things we can do.
Perfect. Well, on that, do you want to give three or do you just want to give one? Because I was going to ask you to kind of wrap up. What
Mhm.
is one key action that people can go out and do today to move them forward in their investing journey?
I'm going to have to give you three.
Great. Amazing. Overachiever, of course.
So I think one is have a plan. So even if you already have a plan, the world is just so different. Okay, like the world has changed so much. I think revisit your plan, and I can help you with that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I think one, whatever you do, have a plan. There is that Warren Buffett thing, idiot with a plan, blah blah blah. But have a plan. Whenever I speak to anybody, including really affluent friends who are, at the top of their careers, and they asking my advice on something, I say, where does this fit in your plan? And they will often look at me and go, what plan would that be, Paul? Um, and maybe that's a function of like corporate life, because in corporate life, kind of someone else maybe has the plan for you. But I think have a plan. Do you know what? Doesn't need to be a good plan. Does not even need to be a good plan. But it has to be broadly, where am I going? And why am I doing this? And roughly, what are those milestones? Something you can put together in 2 hours, basically. Um, Most important task number two, execute the plan every single day, regardless of how you feel. And that again is just like three tasks. Wake up. What are the three things, most important tasks that I can do? And allow yourself to be led by your nature. So I'm a morning person. My brother is a night owl. So my brother works he used to work in IT. So yeah, he used to work across time zones: Argentina, India, Australia. So my brother doesn't get firing till like 11 o'clock at night. I get firing at 6 o'clock in the morning. So we're very different people. But lean into that. So I know that my most high value hour is 6 until 7 o'clock in the morning. So that's head in my journal, having a coffee, just getting absolutely everything clear in my mind. Then off to the gym, meditation, healthy breakfast, bit of time with Millie and Liz, and then like pretty much dialed in by 9 o'clock. And then I'll do the most important thing first, then a little break, maybe go out for a walk in the woods, the second most important task, and then after lunch I'll do the third most important task. But already the law of diminishing returns is kicking in for me after lunch. Already I am like at like 50% of where I'd probably be, and then 3 o'clock onwards it's admin and more kind of social engagement, really. So like execute the plan and execute it daily, and only bite off three most important tasks. And then the final thing, which we've kind of alluded to here, is it's like to prioritize health and well-being. And if you're, I can tell you what shifts me. Like nothing shifts me better than just being out in nature. I mean, I don't want to necessarily advocate that everybody goes surfing, because I don't want like to be responsible for the drowning of like half the population of property investors in the UK. But like nothing comes close to it for me. Like it is otherworldly for me. That I have such a connection with it. I really, when I'm on my board and it's the sunrise, and it just connects with me on such a different level. I wonder if it's even like ancestral. Apparently I'm descended from a Viking. Obviously they spent a bit of time in the water, but for me it just changes everything. But I know that a good friend of mine walks his dog twice a day through the woods. He says that's like pure recalibration for him. Other people go do Thai boxing and just express it in that way, yoga, whatever it is. But for me, it's have like a health well-being reset daily basis, particularly when you're overwhelmed. And for me, that's all about nature. If we circle back also to the AI thing, I think the fear, a lot of the fears that people have around AI, the answer is found in the natural world, in that human beings will always want genuine connection with other human beings. And that's why it's a higher order skill that we need to make sure we preserve and our children preserve as well. So I talk to my daughter a lot. She's very smart. She's more on the mathsy kind of brain thing. But I always say to her, the most important skill is your ability to relate to humans, because that will be the skill that's in demand. Hence why, I host retreats. It's that reconnecting with what humans are like. And it's funny, like it's quite easy as a human being now to lose that connection, both with the natural world, but also with humans. When people, it's amazing watching humans at the end of a retreat. You kind of see them reset back to their natural order of things.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about your obviously your retreat, but also your breakfast meeting as well. So you do that once a month. Are you doing that hybrid now, like because I think you alternated it for a while.
Yeah, so it's been on like a complete evolution from being entirely online from being entirely on person to being entirely online. So where the groove of it is now, which I'm really enjoying, so I reckon I'm going to stick with, is we do a charity event in January, every January, and we'll put a link in the show notes if we can. And we do it for an amazing charity in Leeds called Flourishing Families. So Flourishing Families, I became connected with them through COVID, because in COVID, obviously all the schools shut, and that was a very challenging experience for kids in disadvantaged families who didn't necessarily have the resources that other families had. And maybe they had parents who were struggling themselves with challenges in life, around addiction and ill health and those kind of things. Anyway, they did the most amazing work, and they continue to do it now. So their whole ethos is, if you look after the family, the kids do all right, and kids do all right, become great, well-adjusted human beings. And you look at terrible things that happen in the world. No enlightened, nurtured human being would ever go on to do a terrible thing. So if we can look after the kids, pretty much eventually everybody will be well. And I love them. I think they're amazing and they do great work. So every year, host this event. Everybody leaves with a one-page business plan. It's 2 hours. I take you through a load of different exercises, and it pops out a one-page business plan if you want one. And then every quarter, we meet up in person in Alton Hall, which is this beautiful like kind of golf resort thing. 7:30 till 9:30 in the morning, 2 hours, great breakfast, no speakers, no presentations per se, but just like really high value networking. And then obviously I do my podcast. So the thinking behind that is, if I was going to have speakers at the event, these would be the speakers. But rather than have them speak to people in the room, I'll chuck them on the podcast, and then we can talk about it when we have the session. So it's like taking the knowledge element out and focusing on the networking. And then every year I organise the adventure retreat. So the adventure retreat is typically in September. Everybody's welcome. And we go up a mountain, we do some paddleboarding, do some yoga. You eat loads of beautiful food. So I'm a like complete carnivore, but all the food is like vegetarian and vegan food, because it's good for us to try new things. I include myself in that. And that's good fun. That's look out for that every September. That's pretty wild. And that's good fun. And then following on from that, I then organise these quarterly retreats where I take people surfing, paddleboarding. We do a lot of like beach sauna, cold exposure stuff. It's all good. It's all really good fun.
It does sound like good fun. Yeah. I've been meaning to get to the retreat one, but with having the baby and the little one, it's haven't quite managed it yet. But I've always got FOMO every time I see you guys on your retreat. Like, oh god,
When you can get away,
yeah,
come. You'll absolutely love it.
I
You'll
will.
love it. And it's hosted by the most remarkable women. You know, they call, there's a pose in yoga called the goddess pose, and so they're kind of called the goddesses, and they just take amazing care of us. And you know, safety first. So we've got professional mountain guide, professional paddleboard instructors, qualified yoga teachers. So it's not me like just like messing about. I have this amazing female team of people.
Well, I don't think anyone who's heard your podcast and got this far would even dream that you would be messing about. I'm sure it'd be all planned out and organised and executed on that plan. So we will put the links to those in the show notes, Paul. And
Thank you.
I honestly, we could just talk to you all day, and I'm really grateful for your time and just sharing your, your philosophies, your mission, your purpose with us, and your big dreams for next year and beyond. So. As I said, there's so many things that we didn't even get to talk about today that I think we'll bring you back on next year and be good to follow up with what happens. And of course, everything's just changing so fast, and it's great to stay plugged into people like you who are moving with the times. You've got the plan, you've got that vision, so it's inspiring. So yeah, amazing. Thank you.
I'll leave you with a well. Thank you very much for the introduction, for those very kind words. I'll leave you with a little fun exercise that somebody can do. If you go onto AI and put in the year of your birth and put in something like, what are all the world-ending events that have happened since the date of your birth, and it will come up with like 20 events that are apparently were foretelling the end of the world. And what do you notice? The world did not end. It continues to go forward. Babies keep on being born. It's all good. I think there's room for being optimistic. I really thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. It's Michelle. It's always an absolute pleasure. And love to come back again if you'll have me.
Amazing. Likewise. Right. Okay. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening to us. Tune in next time for another fabulous guest speaker. Take care for now.